Okay, here we are. Welcome back. This is Mr. Pillsbury for World History, as we are going to get into learning about the life of Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin. So we're going to learn how they built a communist state today. This is going to be quicker than normal because I have limited space on my hard drive and your attention for a video is probably a little shorter than in class. So we're going to just get right into it. So the definition of communism is a classless, moneyless, stateless society based on common ownership of the means of production. And we've talked about this before with a commune in, say, Hawaii, where everybody shares everything. And in theory, communism works. But the reality is, the real key point is it takes away motivation from the people who are in the society. So there's some funny things that people have written. Communism, it doesn't pay. Communism killed 100 million people and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. That's kind of funny. And you can see here the sickle and the hammer, which stands for the agricultural workers and the industrial workers, and it says fail. So why were the Russians ready to revolt? Well, we're going to get into that. And they were ready to revolt because a lot of things, this is a little bit of review, as we had the Romanov family in power for 300 years, and they ended the feudal society in 1861. However, the transition from a feudal society to an industrial society was not going well. And so people were very, very poor, and they basically were living on, nothing. And so that transition took about 40 years. And then the people decided in 1905 to storm the palace, and a lot of people got killed. I think the number was 15,000 got shot or hung after that particular, letting the king know, like, listen, this is not okay. And so, this is going to lead us to World War I, which obviously millions of Russians will die in World War I, and it's going to lead to the rise of Lenin. And so Lenin will come to power. Here's his goals. The goals of Lenin is to build a classless society, which the means of production were in the hands of the Russian people. Now, he did allow private ownership, and Lenin did come to power in November of 1917, and the Romanov family will be sent to Siberia to basically wait their fate. You're welcome to watch the rest of the movie. It's on YouTube if you want to look it up. I posted the title on my website if you want to go check that out. So Lenin was gone for 17 years. He was in a variety of different places, from Finland to Germany. And so this kind of leads us to the 3-year civil war between 1918 and 1921. And it was the Reds who, were the communists versus the Whites, who were the czarist imperialist officers. So the Whites were basically people who worked for the king and the queen. And, the people who were the counter-revolutionaries, the people who did not want the revolution to happen, because you had a revolution and a civil war going on at the same time, which is almost just crazy. The Allies, or the United States, Great Britain, France, will intervene, and they wanted to stabilize the government, so they actually wanted the king to stay in power. However, that is not what actually will result from this time period. There's definitely a lack of a unified front that kind of just destroyed this whole thing, and Lenin will absolutely, he's a bad guy, but of all the guys that are in charge, he's one of the better guys that are there. He still killed 30,000 people in Russia during this time period. And, I think what the Reds appealed to was, I think it's all perspective. You got to think about where they were coming from. And they were coming from a place of very poor, feudal society, and they just, communism looked better to them. It doesn't look better to us because we don't know what that looks like. So for us, it's a step down. For them, it was a step up. And it was a way to drive out foreigners from their nation. So I'm going to keep moving on. So the results for World War I, terrible, terrible, terrible time in Russia. You can just see their economy collapse. Factory and mine output will fall. Peasants stop producing because they knew it would all go to the government. 10 million die in the revolution. 3 million die in the Civil War. 2 million from disease. 5 million from lack of seeds to plant for the next season because they had a famine. So in total is around 15 million people will die. And you also had, about 25 million plus dying of the flu at this particular time. So there was a lot of people dying in and around this time period, and it was really, really hard for these people in Russia. So eventually in 1922, they got a constitution because that's what many people wanted at that particular time, and they set up what's called the Soviet Supreme, or the Supreme Soviet. Any person over 18 could vote, which is fantastic. So now people are actually having a say in their government. All the political power and resources and means of production belong to the people. And the communists obviously had the final say. So this is kind of their transition to something that was more fair, and the people it appealed to the people. And Lenin had that's Jim Cramer at the bottom, by the way, and that's Lenin. I think they look alike, which I think is really funny. But Lenin, his economic solution was called the New Economic Policy, in which he does three things. One, he brings the banks under state control, foreign trade, as well as large industries. He allowed people to have small businesses, which Stalin will not allow to have happen under him, because he thought of himself as more of a god and he controlled everything. And then he put peasants onto small plots of land so they could sell the surplus of what they grew. So they were motivated by that. This was much better than anything else that they had experienced at this particular time. So this was a step definitely in the right direction. From there, we get the results of how did this actually work out real time. It was a compromise with capitalism. It was probably the next perfect step for them coming out of feudalism as they transitioned and dealt with the war with Japan and World War I and their civil war and the revolution. And so Russia's economy was going to recover, and it ended the armed resistance of the people against the government. And so by 1928, the food and industrial production was back to pre-war levels. Unfortunately, something really bad happens in 1924 that's going to kind of make this all go backwards again. And that is going to be the White Army will try to kill Lenin. This is him after he kind of had a couple strokes, so he doesn't look so well in that particular picture. Let me explain to you what happened. A lady will approach Lenin on April 30th, 1918, so this is well before 1924. When Lenin dies, he gets shot 3 times. Once in the arm, once in the jaw, and the third one kind of by the neck. And basically they'll take him to the department. They're going to leave some of the bullets in because they thought if they pulled the bullets out that would kill him. He will have multiple headaches and 3 strokes after this, which will eventually just kill him. And so as we move on from there, I have this great video which I'll post to my website. I'm not going to watch it right now, but eventually in 1924, with all these different strokes and injuries, Lenin's going to die. And so, Lenin warned people, Lenin warned people of who should come next. They said, we don't think Stalin would be a good leader. We're concerned about him. And so Leon Trotsky was actually the next guy in charge. He's the guy up here. But eventually, Lenin dies of tuberculosis and pneumonia. That will kill him. But the initial injuries are what led to that. And so now it's about power struggle, like who's going to be in charge? Is it going to be Leon Trotsky or is it going to be Joseph Stalin? And Trotsky was working with Lenin. He was the next guy in charge, supposedly. He led the Red Army during the revolution. He was a great speaker. He was the architect of the revolution. He absolutely did not support Stalin. But, Stalin will do some things that are very questionable, and here's what's going to happen. Trotsky is going to die. He's going to be killed with an ice pick to the head in Mexico. He left Russia because he was scared for his life, and he wanted to spread communism throughout Europe, and Stalin just wanted to spread communism throughout Russia, and eventually he gets killed because he was a threat to Stalin and what he was trying to do. Stalin's going to come to power, and basically he's going to be called the Man of Steel. He's got a history of being in prison. He wasn't important to the Civil War. Lenin was going to warn them. He said, Comrade Stalin has concentrated enormous power in his hands, and I'm not sure that he always knows how to use that power with sufficient caution. And so, Stalin is a bad dude. And so that's what we're going to get to next. This is part 2. So that's part 1. Part 2 will come next. So you guys can just wait that, and I will record that right now, and you'll see that underneath.